5,000 authors, and I've never been nervous. This is the first time I've been nervous doing something like this. My fellow folks ought to be coming out. Come on out. Come on with me. So, as many of you know, because I haven't kept it a secret, I've been involved with a film called The Man Who Invented Christmas. It's a remarkable film, and it'll be premiering on November 22nd, this Wednesday night. And it's really quite a and I had the time of my life doing it. And what I thought we would do at this program is sort of give you a bit of an anatomy of the making of a film from a book. So it'll be sort of instructive as to how that all happens, because we know so many books become films, and it's not an easy process. This took us 9 years to get made. So you'll understand, hopefully at the end of this, why it did do that. And what I'm going to do is introduce everybody on the panel, and then we're going to show a trailer from the film, which is the trailer. But I just want to say it's not the music that you'll see in the film. We have Michael Dana, who won the Academy Award for Life of Pi's music, doing the music in the film, but it's still a pretty good trailer, I think. So I'm just going to go, and I will start on this side. This is Ian Sharples. Yes? Ian is from the Mob Film Company in London, not the Mob, but the Mob Film Company in London, and he's been co-producer since 2009 of this film with us. He's best known for producing miniseries adaptations of fantasy author Terry Pratchett. You all know him, yes? And he's the best-selling The Color of Magic and Hogfather books. And I also had the opportunity to see a documentary, which I'm hoping to bring to Miami, that the Mob did do, called Cruel and Unusual. It's a documentary about 3 guys who were in Parchment Farm in Louisiana, and they were for 40 years in solitary confinement for a crime they did not commit. And it's a very, very powerful documentary, and we're hoping to bring it to Miami. So this is Ian Sharples. Now, I'm sure you know Les Standiford, but I'm going to give a bit of a formal introduction of Les. Les is the Director of Creative Writing Program at FIU. Yeah, FIU. And he's the best-selling author of 20 books and novels, including the John Deel Mystery Series, in which in even one of his books he killed me off in the first chapter, I think it was. And the works of narrative history, Last Train to Paradise, Bringing Adam Home, Water to the Angels, and The Man Who Invented Christmas, which is why we're here today. So that's Les Standiford. Please give him a warm welcome. Now, I told you that I started this about 10 years ago, and I could only do this because I started a film company along with 2 local folks, and I don't know if they're here, but it's Marvin and Issa Leibowitz, who are not with us this afternoon. But the real person who I could start this with was someone who was really a producer, because I was a bookseller, and that's Paula Mazur, who's right here, who's my partner. She's my partner in the Mazur Kaplan Company. And she's an award-winning producer in her own right. Her work is derived almost solely from literary material, which is why we get along so well. She's taken numerous plays from stage to screen, including, as something you all know, The Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe, and The Vagina Monologues, actually. She also produced Corrina Corrina with Whoopi Goldberg, and Nim's Island starring Jodie Foster. Gerard Butler, and Abigail Breslin. She's now partnered with me, obviously, and all these films, I don't know why she couldn't wait until she was partnered with me on, because they were so successful, but I think we're going to start a good role right now. And she, our company, she'll talk a little bit about it, I hope, too, but in addition to this, we have, how many of you read the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society? But that'll be coming out as a film in April, and Paula camped out in Europe almost between this film and that film for how many months? Almost like 11 months, 14 months about, in London and Dublin trying to get all this done. So she gets my Most Valuable Player award for helping. And then we have Barrett Naluri, who's our director of the film. Barrett came to the fore in the UK directing the pilots for 3 game-changing BBC dramas, things I'm sure you've all seen: Spooks, Hustle, which he co-created, and Life on Mars. Spooks went on to earn the BAFTA for Best Drama. Hustle gave him a Directors Guild nomination, and Life on Mars garnered the International Emmy for Best Drama. He followed these with Tsunami: The Aftermath, something I just saw on HBO, although it was a mini-series, which dealt with the harrowing events of the 2004 Asian tsunami. For his work on the series, he was nominated for an Emmy as Outstanding Director. Cast members of that included Toni Collette and I can never pronounce his name, Chital Ejiofor. Chital Ejiofor. Wonderful actor. And then he did a feature film that I loved called Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day. I'm sure you've seen that with Amy Adams and Frances McDormand. And that film led to work at Warner, Sony, Fox, and numerous other studios and networks, including Return to His Roots, when he helmed the feature version of his TV show Spooks. He worked with us on the set, and I came not knowing him when I went to Dublin to watch this film being shot, and he was just remarkable. You know, his interplay with the actors, and this film, as you'll see, has a lot of kids involved as well, and his empathy for kids and the way he was able to work with them gave me kind of a renewed respect for what directors really have to do, and that's Barrett Naluri. And then Robert Michaelson, who taught me, along with Ian, more about the financial aspects of filmmaking than anything I thought I would ever learn in my life. I thought bookselling was difficult. He's an award-winning Canadian independent feature and television producer and director. Among his many feature films are Hard Choices, which premiered at Sundance and was on numerous top 10 lists. Prayer of the Roller Boys, starring Patricia Arquette, a sci-fi cult classic, which was nominated for a Saturn Award. Pros and Cons, a winner of the Aspen Comedy Film Festival, and Traveler, starring Mark Wahlberg and Bill Paxton, which premiered at South by Southwest. He also directed and produced the comedy Off the Lip, featuring Adam Scott, which the LA Times called the Spinal Tap of surf movies, which I think is great. He's a surfer as well, you need to know. And Robert is also a member of the broader family because Robert and Paul are married as well. So that's a really nice thing. We saved some money on hotel rooms when we were filming. Right. So what I thought we would do now is lower the lights and you'll get a sense of the man who invented Christmas from the trailer.
God bless us, everyone. Follow.
Humbug. So he's had a couple of flops? Well, who hasn't?
You have a new book in mind?
Oh, of course he does.
My lamp's gone out. I've run out of ideas.
Are we in trouble?
No, of course not.
I have told you not to disturb me when I am working.
On Christmas Eve, the spirits pour into the night.
Look here, Mr. Dickens. Pickpockets, streetwalkers, humbug. Those people don't belong in books.
Charles!
It's about a miser, and on Christmas Eve, he meets some kind of supernatural guides.
Does it have a title?
Humbug, A Miser's Lament. Christmas ghost story, Christmas song, Christmas ballad, something like that.
Get the name right, and the character will appear. Scratch. Scrounger. Come on, Scrooge.
Shut the window. You think I'm made of money?
Mr. Scrooge. How delightful to meet you, sir.
Sorry, I can't say the same.
You and I are going to do wonderful things together.
How do you make a world come alive? I could almost see and hear them people.
Even if you'd already written it, we couldn't possibly get it printed and distributed in only 6 weeks.
If I can't finish it, I'll never write again.
The characters won't do what I want. I'm the author here.
Allegedly.
A jolly ghost. What's that mean?
In the season of hope, we will shut out nothing, and everyone will be welcome.
I have to get to the printers by 9 o'clock.
But you still don't have an ending.
Merry, Merry Christmas to one and all. That's enough. Back to work.
God bless us, everyone.
Thank you. That's just the beginning, and you've got to see the full thing to appreciate the power of it. And so I thought we would do in this anatomy of making a film out of a book, I thought we would start with all of the players who are involved in this very, very difficult process. Let's start with Les, who can talk a little bit about the source material and about the book and what drew him to write this book.
Well, is this working? Can you hear me out there? Yep. People often ask me, well, are you happy with what they did to your book? And I can say I'm very happy that my book could be the starting place for what I think's turned out to be a terrific film. I'm a graduate of the American Film Institute, so I had some exposure to the notion that maybe every word that you've written in your book is not going to make its way to the screen. And I am so tickled that Susan Coyne, who's a screenwriter from Canada, and Barrett decided to take this book in the direction they did, which focuses really on the creative process. When Robert first came to me and said, you know, I'd like to, Mitchell has told me about your book and I think I can make a film about it, I said, well, Robert, you do know that my book is about a guy writing a book, don't you? And he said, yeah, but we've got that covered. And normally you might suppose that what you'd see is a series of scenes of a fellow wadding up sheet after sheet of paper and tossing it into the wastebasket. But what they did was, in fact, come up with a way to literally dramatize, as far as I'm concerned, what a writer goes through when he's struggling with the process of bringing some nascent idea into a form that will actually captivate readers. And I think that Susan's done a terrific job of imagining the actual interesting things that go on inside a writer's head when what a writer is really doing in most cases in forming a novel is running a little movie inside her head and then finds the words to somehow get that down on paper in a way that people can appreciate it. And I think what you see in this film is a very accurate and very entertaining, I have to say, representation of what Charles Dickens did. For most people, the flotsam and jetsam of real life is just that, flotsam and jetsam. It goes in one ear and out the other. But for someone like Dickens, a genius like Dickens, he takes names and incidents and memories and profound experiences of life and finds a way to weave those all together into a narrative that, well, in this case, turns out to be one of the most popular books ever written, one that 175 years later, people still take time in the holiday season to sit down with their families and either reread or watch one of the dramatic representations. And, well, they've got a new one to watch because, for my money, the new favorite Scrooge is going to be Christopher Plummer. He's outstanding. I want to say that. That's my part.
Thanks. Let me ask you a quick follow-up question, no less. What drew you to the material in the beginning? What made you think that this would make a good book, the story of Dickens?
Well, I went to graduate school and we studied Charles Dickens, but we didn't spend any time on A Christmas Carol because, I don't know, I think that my professors thought anything that popular wasn't worthy of serious inquiry. And think of that. I thought just the opposite. If anything has remained so popular for so long, isn't it worth giving some time to figuring out why? And when I found out that Charles Dickens had to self-publish this book, how close, when he went to his publishers, they told him to lie down until the urge passed to write a ghost story about Christmas. And he was so upset by that. He was so certain that he'd had the best idea of his life to date that he told his agent, Forster, I will publish this thing myself. And Forster said, but you don't have any money. And Dickens said, well, Forster, that's where you come in. And helped him raise the funds to, in 6 weeks, write and have illustrated and typeset and bound and advertised and delivered to bookstores in 6 weeks. And it sold out all 6,000 copies immediately. Dickens, by the way, was at the nadir of his career. He'd published, though he was famous for having done Oliver Twist and The Old Curiosity Shop, the Pickwick Papers. The last 3 books he had published were had gone terribly for him, and he was ready to quit, move to the continent and become a travel writer. And at the 11th hour, came up with this notion that just maybe he had one more good idea left in him. And when I realized how close we came to not having A Christmas Carol, that's when I was convinced that this was a story worth telling.
Thank you, Les. And I read the book, and when we formed our film company, I had sent it off to Paula and said, we should consider this as potentially a film that we could do. And Paula then probably turned to her right and said, Robert, why don't you talk about that story a little bit? Paula.
So Mitch sent me the book, and our process is, Mitch sent me the book, and the process is, I wake up in the morning, and there's all these things in my inbox from Miami to Santa Monica, where we live, and it's like, how about this? This could be a good TV series, or this is a great movie. And there was this book by Les, and I said, it sounds intriguing, send it on. But, sent the book, read it, and thought, this is great. I have absolutely no idea what to do with it. And at that very day, Robert, my husband, came into my office and he goes, I just got a call from the Canadian Broadcasting Company, and they're looking for an event film, maybe Christmas or something like that. And I was like, have a read, what do you think? And it was just very fortuitous. Robert then took it, he's Canadian, which the Canadian government actually gives you money to help you make films, which the American government does not, so that was really handy, being married to someone who had that. And Robert took it and he ran with it at that point, and went out, found the writer, Susan Coyne, who was fabulous, and started working on putting it together as a screenplay. And its first iteration was actually television. It was a short moment. And then we looked at it and we thought, you know what, let's take a big leap that we can put this out in the theaters and that it's going to work as a feature. And so we took what was a TV script and we completely reworked it into a feature script and to compact it into a 90-minute piece.
Thank you, Paula. And yes. And then we'll move to Robert. So Robert, when you saw that, and I know, just because I know, we went and jumped through a lot of different hoops and went down a lot of different roads. Why don't you talk about some of those, and then talk about how the mob got involved as well?
Okay. Just a few things. It was Charles Dickens wrote this book in 6 weeks, and it only took us 9 years to get it made. So our story is a long, windy road. So it started when I talked to the CBC and they were looking for an event Christmas movie, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And I've never done a Christmas movie before, but I like finding genres and kind of bending them. And when I heard this about Charles Dickens, my image of Charles Dickens was always this picture. There's this classic picture of him as an old man with a scruffy beard, bent over his writing desk writing. And that was sort of the image I had of him. And then I started reading the book, and here this is a 31-year-old, he was actually 29 when the process started, young, vital. He was like a literary rock star of his time. And so that all of a sudden tied in with using A Christmas Carol as the basis and going through Dickens' imagining of A Christmas Carol just became something very exciting and as a way to tell a Christmas story, but that's different. And so that was sort of the start of the process, and it started with Les's book. And so Les has written an incredible book that was incredibly well researched, and so all these stories and tidbits about Dickens that I never even knew about. And we incorporate a lot of those pieces into the movie. And then, as Les was saying, how do you make a story about a writer interesting? And since this was a Canadian project, I was looking for a Canadian writer, and Susan Coyne had done a TV series. I don't know if anyone here had seen it. It's called Slings and Arrows, and it's about a Shakespearean travel troupe, and it had a very kind of whimsical, imaginative element to it. She also writes now. She's one of the main writers for Mozart in the Jungle. I don't know if people have seen that. So really talented writer, and she has this very kind of magical realism element to her work, and so we wanted to kind of figure out how to bring this all to life in a movie and make it entertaining and exciting. So we got the Canadian government to pay for us to take a trip to London. I said it was absolutely necessary that we go and do the research, and they agreed, actually. And we met with a lot of Dickens experts, and we met with Simon Callow, who's in the movie, is also a Dickens expert, and we started hearing all these different stories of how Dickens used to walk the streets of London, 10, 15 miles a day and just see things and incorporate them into his material. He couldn't start, and some of this is in Les's book, he couldn't start writing a book until he had the characters' names, and we have that sort of those elements in the movie as well. So all these kind of little tips, and also the fact that when he was writing, he would be upstairs, there's stories, he'd be upstairs in his study and just becoming all the different characters and talking to himself in the mirror and taking on all these different voices and becoming these different characters. So we tried to figure out imaginative ways of bringing that to the screen. And then also, to make independent films, you need partners. And since it's about Dickens, and Canada and the UK have co-production agreements, which allows you to work together and take advantage of each other's tax benefits. And so I was introduced to Ian Sharples and Vadim John of The Mob, and they made an offer we couldn't refuse. And so we ended up partnering with them, and we went and scouted locations and sort of had this long conversation. And as they say, over this 9-year period, at one point, this was going to be an event Christmas television movie. And we had partners in the UK, and TNT was going to do it, and for various reasons, which I won't go into, these things ebb and flow. And we had such a great script, and it was such a great idea. We said this is too good not to make, and then Paula came back on board, and everyone jumped in, and it was only about 4 years later we got it made. So
right, and then Ian can take it from where you started this.
As Robert said, we were match made by an industry contact, and as quite often happens, we started with one conference call, then became 2 conference calls. He sent, Robert talks about my partner and myself in London, we got sent the treatment, and straight away just thought, we've got to do this is great. We don't know these guys, they're in LA, we're in London, but lots of things start like that. And so very slowly we started working on development together. I think what we liked about it was lots of people in the UK make stuffy period dramas about people like Charles Dickens, and what this definitely wasn't going to be a stuffy period drama. This was Dickens as a rock star at a time when you could legitimately come to the US from Europe and go home again. Not long before his period, if you came to the US, you didn't go home again because you didn't have the ships to do it. And he was one of the first authors to be bootlegged. People were doing counterfeit copies of his books. So it had the sort of the beginnings of fame and all those kind of touch points as well. So Dickens was was very much the start of that modern celebrity, and that felt really fresh and interesting, but as I say, quite contemporary as well. And so we just looked at the material and the Dickens that Les has given us in the book, and just really liked the idea of getting involved in that. And so we formed a partnership, and here we are today to tell you all about it.
No, it's been a remarkable partnership between, we have three companies, the Mazur Kaplan Company, the Mob, and Robert's Company, and I can tell you it's like become a friendship and a family, and we want to do more stuff together, clearly. But tell us how Barrett got snookered into doing this thing with us. Barrett?
Okay, like a short version or a long version? I think I'll do the short version. I'm always kind of gobsmacked when we talk about, it's like, how does any independent film ever get made? It's like the things that have to fall into line over 9 years for it to happen. It's extraordinary. And the passion behind it. And as directors, we come along at the end and take all the credit and the glory. But you know, I came in very last minute to these guys who've been working on it for 10 years. I was on a beach in Mexico. In fact, I've kept the cap. This is my lucky cap. It's from Holbox. I recommend you go there while it's still here and the water levels are low. But I was literally having a margarita on the beach, and these two guys phoned up and said, we've got a take on, and Ian, who had introduced us by, I've worked with Ian actually 30 years ago taught me how to use a camera. So it kind of goes back to, you know.
Well back into the last century.
Yes, let's not talk about that. Victorian times. But these guys rang up and said, we have this script, and it's, you know, it's a very different take on Christmas Carol, because it's not Christmas Carol, it's Charles Dickens meets Christmas Carol. And we know you're a big fan of Christmas Carol. I'd been attached to a couple of versions of it already, which hadn't gone because for other reasons. And so I said, okay, and I borrowed my son's iPad and downloaded Les's book, and they sent me the script, and basically got transported back to Victorian Christmassy England, and it was kind of the start of it. About 6 months later, I'm in Dublin. So
what really happened, though, was once we gave Barrett the script, he couldn't hear us. He was on this island, so he had to hike halfway up a mountain, and he was looking for the spot where the cell reception was good. And I was like, so did you like it? Did you like it? And he was like, I'm in. And honestly, 48 hours later, he was on a plane to Vancouver to meet Dan Stevens, who was already attached to play Dickens. And that had to work. It's all about chemistry and people feeling good about working with other people. So Barrett just literally jumped on a plane, went to Vancouver. Dan is shooting a TV series, so we were squeezing a meeting with Barrett in between takes of the TV series, and they met, and it just really clicked. And so Barrett was on as director, and I think, Robert, 4 days later, we were scouting in Dublin. It was insane. It just really tumbled into being fast.
Yeah, it moved really, really quickly. I would get,
Yeah.
they go and they go fast, and then you also have to find money to make it go. You know, maybe we could talk a little bit, maybe during the Q&A as well, but one thing that I've learned is all of the money that you get to make a film you really don't get it until you start making the film. So the question is, how do you then finance that period before you're making the film? Paula?
I just have to do a call out here. David Lewand is sitting in the first row. David, wave your hand. Okay, so this is kind of like Hanukkah. So we're on the ground in Dublin. We're ready to make this movie. We're casting. We've got Dan Stevens, Christopher Plummer, Jonathan Pryce. Everything is going forward, except we have no money, and we're shooting in a few weeks. And it was coming, but it just wasn't there yet, and we're like, having to build sets and make costumes from 1843. They were all handmade. All those costumes you saw, they're handmade. So it's not like you just go into the store and buy it off the rack. It's not the process. And we needed money immediately. And Mitch, we went to Mitch and said, Mitch, we need like a fairy godmother or father to help us here through this. So we gave him an amount of money that we could use, and we thought it'll get us through 2 or 3 weeks of pre-production, and then the money's gonna come in. So Mitch went to David Lewant, and David asked no questions. We've worked with David on other projects. He is fantastic, and he wrote out a check. May I say the amount, everybody? No, okay. It wasn't that much. And it was gonna last us for like 2 to 3 weeks. And we kind of liken it to the Hanukkah story with the oil. Like, you know, it's supposed to go for 1 day, but then it goes for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this money, not so much, that David gave us, which was just supposed to be a little gap, ended up getting us through 8 weeks of pre-production. And at the end of each week, these two brilliant producers would go, who do we not have to pay this week? And that's kind of how we stretch the Hanukkah money out till our money actually dropped.
And I wasn't in Dublin at the time, but I was getting emails trying to figure all of this out. Like, all right, how are we doing all of this? And then realized when I got to the set that the actors actually and the director, you guys actually started the film not getting paid for that very first week, I think it was, because, am I wrong about that, Robert? Or?
No, just so you know, and the money is sort of promised from a lot of different entities. So we actually had the money promised from all these different parties, but until everyone signs every contract, it doesn't come to us. So there's this huge promised amount of money, but
but tell that to an actor, right?
You have to bridge
it's
it and figure out how to keep
you're
going.
Get it.
If you go to someone and say, well, we've got this money promised, will you work for us, or how do you pay for food and for all these different things? So was kind of the exercise. And unfortunately, in a lot of independent films, everyone is in this really kind of crunch zone.
Well, and I just want to say, a lot of the independent films fall apart around that point, and these guys did not let it fall apart, and they did a remarkable job doing it. So now that you know the process in terms of...
Every night, Ian and I would get on the phone and we go, we're still standing. That was like, that was our mantra, that we would just get through.
Every Friday we get this thing, yeah, we're still here. We still have 80 people working for us.
It's the AA of filmmaking, 1 day at a time. That's
so now,
Attitude adjustment, keep going.
Now that you know how precarious this all is, what I thought we would do is we do have a featurette that was made that tells a little bit more about the process of the film. It's very short, it's a couple of minutes. And I thought we would show that and then go to Q&A, because we have about 10, 12 minutes left. So let's see that, then I know you may have some questions out there as well. So if we can lower the lights and go to that, that would be great.
Tell him who you are.
I am the ghost of Christmas past. Follow.
Not bloody likely.
This film is a sort of origin story of A Christmas Carol.
Mr. Charles Dickens!
Dickens was a rock star of that time, but falls from grace.
So he's had a couple of flops. Oh, well, who hasn't?
He was sort of going through a midlife crisis at 32.
My lamp's gone out. I've run out of ideas. He has hit a bit of a blank. The pressure was really mounting, and he's got young children. He was overspending and yet was concerned about dwindling finances.
What about an advance?
You have a new book in mind?
It's about a miser. On Christmas Eve, he meets some kind of supernatural guides.
Does it have a title?
Humbug, A Miser's Lament. Christmas ghost story, Christmas song, Christmas ballad, something like that.
Even if you'd already written it, we couldn't possibly get it illustrated in only 6 weeks.
This is what Charles Dickens had to go through to make the greatest Christmas book ever produced a reality. He had to publish it himself. He had it illustrated himself.
He's got a lot on his shoulders.
A jolly ghost. What's that mean?
He had this intense theatrical imagination.
Get the name right and the character will appear.
There's a playfulness to the way in which these characters literally manifest.
Scrooge.
Shut the window. You think I'm made of money?
Mr. Scrooge.
How delightful to meet you, sir.
Sorry, I can't say the same.
Dickens talked about the characters in his books being more real to him than people he knew in his life.
They become his torturers in a way. He gets writer's block, and particularly Scrooge becomes his nemesis.
I'm the author here.
Allegedly. They all have their opinions and their suggestions. My character doesn't get to explain his side of things. So I've taken the liberty of writing a short speech.
No.
What Dickens created became important to the whole world.
He completely changed the way people looked at poverty.
Those people don't belong in books.
Those people, you mean the poor? Dickens permeates the culture in a way that no other Christmas story does, with the possibility of goodness. And how do we treat our fellow man? Christmas wasn't celebrated quite that way before Christmas Carol.
God bless us, everyone.
It's the most extraordinarily charming and magical Christmas story.
Oh, Mr. Scrooge, you and I are going to do wonderful things together.
Merry Christmas to one and all.
Just that before we'll take some questions. If you have any, please go to the mic. But just a couple of quick housekeeping things. The next part of it that we didn't go into is the distribution. So the film is being distributed by Bleecker Street Films, and it'll be opening up in about 500 theaters on Thanksgiving weekend. And in Miami, right now, I know that it'll be playing at the Sunset, in the Shops of Sunset, and in the AMC Theater in Aventura. And those of you watching on C-SPAN, just check your local listings. It'll probably be opening in more theaters come Monday, so you can go to the Bleecker Street website and you'll be able to find out exactly where it's playing near you. So if there are any questions, we'd be happy to take some. Here come a couple, I see.
Thank you. This question's for Les. I've seen the movie trailer and heard you all talking and seen the featurette, and you're looking at the process that Dickens is going through. It seems so torturous. As an author, I'm trying to visualize you going through this. Is this the kind of thing that you go through when you write?
Are you saying is this accurate? This torturousness?
well, at least for you.
Well, it's a mixture of hope and torture. You get like Dickens, you get an idea that you think is full of promise, and then the agony comes in, always striving to do the best you can to make it manifest, and worrying that what you're coming up with isn't quite getting it. And as Dickens, or as Dickens says, the first thing was to get the name of the character, in hopes that would bring the character to life, in hopes that then the characters would begin to help tell the story, which really does happen, despite those who might poo-poo the notion. The characters, when you're lucky, do help you tell the story. And when I saw the first dailies of that moment where Scrooge comes alive for Dickens, and there's that wonderful interchange, how delightful to meet you, Mr. Scrooge, and sorry, I can't say the same. I thought, they've got this. This is going to work. I believe that it's an accurate representation of what we go through when we struggle to make something work that we think really is important to make work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. It's a universal story, so have you sold the international rights yet?
Yes, it's going to be opening in a number of different. It's going to be opening in Canada.
It opens in Canada on the 24th of November, and London, December 1st, UK, December 1st, and Ireland as well. Australia on the 30th.
New Zealand. Italy.
Italy.
The Italian version's great. Scrooge.
But I don't. Do we have the French? Has the French? The French are picking it up as well, because I know that German, French.
Yeah, it'll be everywhere.
I know that the Russians have put in a claim. It's true. They're going to reserve it for next year because they can't dub it fast enough to get in. But So maybe we'll be singing in Russian next year as well.
Well, I'm delighted to say that I have already seen the movie. I got a sneak preview this week, and it was fabulous.
Thank you.
It's even better than the preview. And I saw the preview. So when I got a pass to see it as a sneak preview, I was so excited. I was like jumping up and down and calling my friends, come on with me to the movie. It was great. So you guys really nailed it. So you're saying that it took 9 years from start to finish, but you didn't tell us how long the actual filming took. I'm curious to know the filming itself once you got the script written.
Well, in a kind of life imitating art kind of way, we did it in 6 weeks. And
Really?
in a run up to the shoot itself, in the run up to Christmas 2016, on either side of Christmas 2016. So.
And I say in the promotion of it, since it has Christmas in the title, we have about 6 weeks to get a really good box office out of it as well.
Yeah.
Everything is 6 weeks.
Well, it was wonderful. The music was wonderful, and the story itself and the costuming was fabulous. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very, very much. Thanks. Well, I know that C-SPAN runs like clockwork, and we're getting down to the time, but I just want to thank these guys for being here with us and And I also want to give 2 special shout-outs to my lovely partner, Paula, who I just couldn't do any of this without. People say, you know, you're a bookseller. How are you able to do this? Well, I say it's because I have someone who's not a, I say I have someone who's a real producer who's on my team. And then just on a real personal note, I just want to give a shout-out to my mother, who's right over there, who hasn't been able... And anyway, I also want to thank everybody at Miami-Dade College for being so supportive of not only what we've done today, but for this book fair. You know, it's been a remarkable week. We have another, I was going to say we have another day ahead of us, but we don't. But you've got a marvelous program coming right afterwards with Bob Hass and Charles Simic and Campbell McGrath in conversation with them. So just soak it all up, and thank you very, very much. Oh, by the way, Les will be signing his book outside, and we have a whole stack of posters, really beautiful posters, that the rest of the group will be signing out in the signing area as well. And the posters are free, so feel free. Thanks.